Good morning. We are here to discuss Parshas Chukas, and the title for today's class is Generating Upward Trajectory. The idea of being able to gain power and momentum to move upward. Today, and the month of Tammuz, the shir is dedicated in memory of Doris Lombardi on the anniversary of her Yahrzeit, dedicated by Brittany and Daniel Lombardi and family. Brittany and Daniel are an incredible couple that live in Miami Beach, and we feel very honored and privileged to know them and to have them as part of our yeshiva family. They're super close to so many of my family members, and we appreciate them so much and their quest for Torah learning and knowledge, and we are honored that they are partnering with us by dedicating this month on the Yahrzeit of Doris Lombardi. She was a loving and devoted grandmother who made us know that we, her descendants, were her world. She lived a joy-filled and passionate life. She was warm and outgoing, left an impression on everyone she met, and always stressed through her words and action the beauty and importance of Judaism and Am Yisrael. Her memory and impact on our lives is a true blessing to our family. We are filled with joy and pride in knowing that we are living lives in line with the values that she lived and taught us. So may her neshama have an aliyah, and may there be tremendous blessing and the observing of Doris's legacy among all of her descendants. Separately, this week's class is dedicated to Li'Iluy Nishmas Dovid Tzvi ben Yaakov, who was a dear friend of the yeshiva, an alumnus of the yeshiva, and he really was an incredible, gentle, kind, simchas hachayim human being. He passed away way too young and pretty suddenly from an illness. His name, Reb David Steingrut. Many of us in the yeshiva still maintained close relationships with him. We wish the family a tremendous nechama, and we are hopeful that learning that we are doing will be l'schus aliyas nishmaso. We miss him dearly and are very, very, very saddened by that loss. So we are, as I mentioned, discussing the concept of generating upward trajectory. Now, one of the things that I think is important to kind of preface our shir today is that we know that this Parsha, Parshas Chukas, is filled with many interesting topics. And the first one is Para Aduma, the red cow. And simply put, the red cow is one of the mysteries of the Torah. The idea that we need a completely red cow to be slaughtered and burned, and the ashes to be sprinkled with with water upon people who have contracted tumas meis, ritual impurity of having come in contact with dead people, is one of the mysterious processes that the Torah describes that are very difficult for us to understand. Now, a typical thought about this entire parsha is that what the Torah is doing is letting us know that, some things we're just not going to understand, and we have to accept it. Like, as we know, we have to accept many things in life that we don't understand, as we were just discussing, the untimely passing of a really terrific, great, righteous human being. It's also hard to understand. Okay, so there are mitzvahs in the Torah that we call chukim. A chok is something that is very difficult to understand, and so we're supposed to understand that we're not supposed to understand. That seems to be one of the general themes of chok, and specifically Para Aduma. What I'd like to do today is to share what I think is a very foundational aspect of learning. It is actually part of our mission statement in the yeshiva and all of our schools, and I want to share what that is a little bit later. And I want to come to try to explain a different way to be looking at Para Aduma than I think most people tend to look at it. A few years ago, one of our very esteemed chashuv bacharim were learning in Eretz Yisrael. Currently, he's a rebbe, and he called me from a yeshiva that he was learning there, and he said he was having discussions with people about the Para Aduma, and it seems that, according to Rashi, the way Chazal explain it, Parah Aduma is not meant to be understood, and we should not be we shouldn't busy ourselves with thinking about it. So to what is this Chashuv Bachar, to what was he referring? The first Rashi in our Parsha. The Torah says, Zos Chukas HaTorah, this is the statute, this is the law of the Torah. And the Rashi says that the Satan, right, this archangel that encourages us to sin or to prosecute us, or is the angel of death, as the Talmud says, that the Satan, the angel of death, and the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, are really all the same being. That's what the Talmud says. The Satan and the nations of the world, they deride the Jewish people. They mock, to some extent, the Jewish people, saying, what's this mitzvah? What is this commandment, the Parah Aduma? What's ta'am yeshba? What reasoning is there in it? You could even translate over here, taste. What taste in the word ta'am, reason and taste is there? What flavor? What do you get out of this mitzvah? Therefore, says Rashi, the Torah says chuka. It's a decree. Gezerah hi milefanai. It is a decree from it before me. Ein lecha reshus. You have no permission laharher achareha, to contemplate after it. That is the language of Chazal based on Midrash Tanchuma. So this very esteemed Bacher says to me, it seems that, look, there are things that we're just not meant to understand, and we don't have permission to think about it. So I said to him, I really beg to differ, and I gave him an explanation as to what Rashi is telling us, something that I think is much more profound, and I think it's really critical. As I mentioned before, it's foundational. It's really critical to have a better understanding of what it is Chazal, the Chachamim, are telling us about Chok, and how we're supposed to approach this Parsha, and really the Torah in general. And lastly, this whole concept that we'll be discussing, I think, is so important to understanding who we are as a nation and who we need to continue to be as a nation, and why it's so critical for us today to pursue this specific concept and way of thinking. And we'll begin now by discussing a couple more questions on the Parsha. Aside from understanding this Rashi, is this Rashi really telling us that we have no permission to contemplate the Parah Aduma, or is it something else? So we'll begin with some other questions which are truly fascinating about the Parsha. The Torah starts off by Hashem speaking to Moshe and Aaron, saying, Zos Chukas HaTorah. Now, taken at face value, where on this phrase that that we just learned is commenting, it sounds like this is the chok of the Torah. Now, there are several chukim in the Torah. We know that in several places, Rashi gives us other examples. Chazer, right? Non-kosher food, that's also one of the chukim of the Torah. There's a lot of chukim of the Torah. Shatnez, mixing wool and linen together, working animals together of different species, that's not allowed. That's also a chok of the Torah. So what does the Torah mean over here? This is the chok of the Torah. The Torah could have simply said that this is a chok in the Torah by saying that Zos chok, right? This is a chok that Hashem is commanding. Not this is the chok of the Torah, sounding like this is the only chok of the Torah. So what is this categorical statement that sounds like this is the only chok of the Torah? Because it's the chok of the whole Torah. And we have plenty of other sentences that talk about chukim and mishpatim. Why does Parah Aduma, the red cow, get the distinction of being called the chok of the Torah, sounding like it's the only one? That's one question. Another question is, the Torah tells you, this is the chok of the Torah. And then the Torah tells you, take a completely red cow that has no blemishes in it, that never had a yoke put on it, no work was done with it, and give it to Elazar the Kohen. And then the Torah goes on to describe a whole detailed procedure of burning it and ashes and mixing it with mayim chayim. And it's not until And the Torah also describes that all the people that are involved in it become tamei. It's not until after the Torah tells you that this should be as a statute, that this process should be as a statute for the Jewish people forever, it's not until that sentence, which is the 11th sentence in the Parsha, that the Torah says anything about what you do with this and why you're doing it. The Torah only in sentence 11 says, by the way, if a human being, a Jew, comes in contact with a corpse, with a dead person, in a variety of ways, then he uses this whole ashes and water thing that we just described to become pure. Would it not have been much more logical for the Torah to say, a person who touches a dead person becomes impure? How do you help that person to regain purity? Oh, take the red cow and do the whole process. But instead, the Torah starts with the whole process. This is what you should do. And it's extremely detailed and says this should be the law forever, as if that's a standalone concept. Seemingly, it only exists in order to purify a person who came in contact with a corpse, with a human being that was dead. So why does the Torah seemingly do a very backwards job of describing the purpose of the Parah Aduma? The Torah should have said that a person who comes in contact with a corpse becomes Tameh, and this is how you help that person. Instead, the Torah says, do this whole big process that seems very odd to understand, that we have no clue even why we're doing it. And then afterwards says, by the way, anybody who comes in contact with the dead, you'd use that ashes and water to help that person. So it's a very strange way. The Torah should really start with the problem of ritual impurity acquired by contact with a human corpse, and then explain the laws of the Parah Aduma, the red cow, as the solution. One other really interesting observation here is that if you look in that sentence that I mentioned, sentence 11, and it says like this, that anybody who comes in contact with a corpse needs to use these ashes, and he gets sprinkled on the 3rd day of his impurity, and he gets sprinkled again on the 7th day of his impurity, and then he becomes pure. And then sentence 13 says, any person that comes in contact with a corpse and he does not become purified, he is defiling the sanctuary of Hashem, and he will be cut off. So it's very strange, because we do know that a person who's Tamei Meis and goes into the sanctuary, we know that that person gets kares. It's a very severe sin. So if a human being came in contact with a corpse, and then they go to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple, without becoming purified, they get cut off. That's true. But that's not what the sentence says. The sentence says anybody who becomes in contact with a corpse and doesn't become purified, he gets cut off. It doesn't say if he goes into the Mishkan, he gets cut off. It says by not becoming purified, he's defiling the sanctuary and he gets cut off. It should say if he goes into the sanctuary, he will get cut off. And the Torah actually repeats this again a little bit later, which is another whole question. But if you want to take a look at it, again, it says anybody, sentence 20, any man that becomes impure and doesn't purify, he gets cut off, because he's defiling the mikdash of Hashem. So it repeats this concept, and in both cases, it doesn't say if he goes into the temple while he's impure, then he becomes cut off. It just says if he does not become purified, so then he's defiling the sanctuary of Hashem, and he becomes impure. So that is just a very incredible way that the Torah presents the idea of kares, of getting cut off, for being impure. So our questions are, is the message of this chok, that the way that Rashi seems to describe it, that we're not allowed to think about it, is that really the message and we're just supposed to accept it? And I do believe that that is the norm, the way that most people approach it. That's question number one. Question number two is, why does the Torah start with the Parah Aduma instead of starting with the problem of ritual impurity and then say the red cow is coming to address that? That's question number two. Question number three is, why does the Torah imply that a person is cut off for not becoming purified, instead of a person who's in contact with the dead does not become purified, and then he enters the sanctuary, then he becomes cut off? So I'd like to begin with a story that a friend of mine told me, and it's about Jews. And we see this all the time. So this friend of mine, he owns a number of hotels, motels, and whenever a person checks into his hotels, they have the regular check-in process, and part of the process is explaining the different features of the hotel and some of the regulations. So one of the regulations was that this area of the hotel is off limits after 11 o'clock at night. And my friend says that whenever this process is explained to people, and then the customer in this process says, why is it not available after 11 o'clock? He says, they're Jewish. Anytime the person asks, why is that the rule? They're Jewish. And what I gleaned from that and what I learned from that is that Jews love to ask the question, why? So one of our questions is going to be, why do Jews love to ask the question, why? And that's what we're going to discuss right now. In one moment. So there's a beautiful Rashi in Parshas Va'era when Hashem and Moshe are having the discussion of Moshe saying, why have you done evil to these people? After Moshe goes to Paro the first time, and Paro makes everything much harsher, and Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Hashem, he says, Lama hariyosel lama zeh, why are you doing evil to these people? So as per Chazal, and Rashi brings, Hashem says, woe is on those that are lost and no longer to be found. I missed the earlier tzaddikim. He says, when I told Avram Avinu to bury Sarah, and he couldn't find a burial place until he had to pay through the nose, he had to pay an exorbitant amount, right? And Yitzchak also, when he was digging the wells and everybody was giving him tremendous grief, all the Goyim were fighting with him, right? And Yaakov, when he had to buy Shechem, right? None of them were meharher achar midosai. That's Rashi's lashon. None of them were meharher. They didn't contemplate after my attributes. Meaning, Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov did not challenge me and say, "How could you put me through this Gehenna? I'm just trying to bury my wife. I'm just trying to do what I think you want with digging the wells of Avraham. I'm trying to get a portion in Eretz Yisrael." None of them turned to me and said, Hashem, how could you do this? And Rashi's lashon is v'lo hir haru acher midosai. So I would like to suggest from here that to think or to contemplate can have many different connotations, and that the meharher word, which is used mostly in negative contexts, does not mean to think or to contemplate. It means it means to be skeptical. Means to think and to suspect something nefarious, or to obsessively think about something from a very selfish point of view and not from a curious, open-eyed exploration point of view. That's what meharher means. And so just like Rashi tells us that Hashem is telling to Moshe, how can you ask that I'm doing evil to these people? I'm not doing evil to these people. You have a question. Good, you have a question. It's harder for them. You could ask me, why is it harder for them? You could ask me that question. That's fine. But you can't suspect that I'm doing evil to them, because that is not thinking and exploring and questioning. That's coming from a biased point of view that's imputing to me a negative intention. You don't understand how it could not be negative. Fine, that you have a question, but you can't presume that it is negative. You don't have a right to be skeptical. That's what Hashem is telling Moshe. And that's what the message of the Para Aduma is. The Para Aduma is the hardest to understand. Shlomo HaMelech says about this mitzvah, Amarti achkama v'hi rechoka mimeni. I said that I would be smart, and Para Aduma, the laws of the red cow, was far away from me. That doesn't mean that Shlomo HaMelech is saying I'm not allowed to think about it. That means he's saying, as smart as I am, and we know that he was the biggest chacham to ever live. Hashem listened to his tefillah that he should gain chachma, and Hashem gave him chachma. But with all the chachma that Hashem gave him, this is still a very distant, inaccessible thing to glean the deeper understandings of the Parah Aduma. Very, 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 very far from him. But when Chazal say that you don't have reshus to be meharher after it, Chazal are not saying that you don't have permission to think about it. They're saying you don't have a right to suspect that there's something nefarious or that Hashem is just putting you through some crazy process that makes no sense, like puppets on a stick, that he's just trying to manipulate you to do crazy things, which is what the Goyim want us to think. That's what the Satan and the Umos HaOlam, they're coming from a negative, prejudiced, skeptical perspective, and they want us to also have a negative and skeptical perspective. That's what it means you don't have reshus to be meharher. It doesn't mean you don't have a right to think about it. It means you don't have a right to be skeptical about it and to suspect that God has a bad intention behind giving us this commandment. And the proof is that Shlomo HaMelech is not saying, I'm not allowed to think about it. He's saying it's far away from me. By definition, if it's far away from him, it means he's pursuing it. But he understands that it's far away from him. Doesn't mean that it has to be rejected and put out. I'm not allowed to think about it. It's the opposite. I have to understand how vastly deep the Torah is. And because the Torah is infinite, how it can appear to be so inaccessible. But of course we have to pursue it. Of course we have to think about it. And many Chachamim in the earlier generations and the later generations have given a lot of different explanations about the Parah Aduma that are steps in the right direction. We have to continue to try to understand it. We have to continue to try to make sense of the most that we can about it, but we have no permission whatsoever to think that it's something negative and that we're not allowed to think about it. God forbid, it's the opposite. We're supposed to think about it. And this is what I was alluding to before, that is part of our mission statement of all of our institutions, and that is to ask the hardest questions. The Torah wants us to be on a constant process of asking the hardest questions. And sometimes the Torah sets us up to make us feel like we're totally lost. We have no idea what's going on here, not to put us off and not to discourage us to close the Sefer, the opposite, to then look deeper and try to understand better. And then you'll get more awareness and understanding. It's the opposite of not think about it. It's think about it, but don't think about it from a skeptical, negative point of view. And that's why the Torah over here doesn't come to tell you, oh, let me make this very easy for you to understand, at least as easy as I can. If a person becomes tameh, if a person becomes impure to a dead person, and now he's not allowed to go to the Beis HaMikdash, what can he do? The answer is do the Parah Aduma. No, Torah's telling you the opposite. Torah is telling you that the path of Torah learning is something that prima facie is going to always seem inaccessible. It's going to always seem like, really? That's what I'm supposed to do? Why am I supposed to do that? And even those that are mishpatim, that we say we understand them, if we just read the words of the Torah is always opening up something for us that's much deeper than we would really on our own ever think about. And so the chok of the Torah, when we say this is the chok of the Torah, this is the place in the Torah where you see that what the Torah is doing is setting you up to explore further something which seems inexplicable and is infinite and is beyond your comprehension. And the Torah is drawing you in and saying, this is the process you always have to go through. You have to do something that seems very outlandish. Take a completely red cow that never had any work with it, and it can't have any blemish, and you have to give it, and you have to take it outside the camp, which is also strange because we don't do offerings outside the camp almost ever, and you have to do this blood, and you have to sprinkle it towards the Beis HaMikdash, and you have to burn it. He has to burn it in front of him, which is also something that we don't do except on the Mizbeach, right? The whole thing is strange, and a hyssop branch, and a red scarlet wool, and the whole thing, yeah, because when you get involved in understanding infinity, it's going to seem like an inexplicable process that's just not something that we can access. But that's what you go through, and then you will learn how it helps you. Okay, you don't understand why it helps you when a person becomes ritually impure, that's fine. But that's what it's here for. It's here to make the Beis HaMikdash accessible to you, despite the fact that you human beings brought death into the world through sin. Hashem, in his infinite wisdom, has given you a wherewithal to be able to approach the Mikdash if you do this process. But you do this process without understanding what you're doing, specifically because as human beings, we are very infinitely apart from Hashem, and he's going to take us through the way to do this. But that's the chok of the whole Torah. For those of us that think we understand the mitzvahs, we have a problem. Because there's always more to understand, and there's always more to explore. You have to understand that the whole Torah is a setup to expose us to a completely different dimension that will allow us to transform and to grow and to understand more and more about everything in the Torah. That is the chok of the Torah in general. And it's for this reason, I believe, Chazal say a very fascinating teaching over here in sentence 14. This is chapter 19, sentence 14. This is the Torah. This is the Torah. When a person will die in the tent, everything that comes into the tent, anything that's in the tent is tamei 7 days. And the rabbis say, you know what that pasuk is talking about? The Torah is only for a person who kills himself in the tent. This is the Torah. When a man will die in the tent, means you only get Torah acquisition if you're willing to kill yourself in the tent of the Torah. How do the rabbis know what's talking about that? And my suggestion is because the rabbis are saying that the law of the Parah Aduma is telling you that the entire Torah is not really for regular human beings. It's only for a human being who's willing to completely change himself and reorient himself to a whole new paradigm way of thinking that Hashem is trying to open our minds to being able to access. But that's only if we're willing to let go of what we think we need as human beings. If we can have a willingness, if we can teach ourselves, inculcate into ourselves that we are completely willing to reorient the way that we think, then the Torah will expand our minds into dimensions that are beyond what a human being is capable of understanding. And that is the Torah. Zos HaTorah. This is the Torah. A man who will kill himself in the tent of the Torah, meaning he will focus and change from what he thinks it should be to understanding what the Torah is telling him it should be. That's a person that can have access to the whole Torah, including to the Parah Aduma, which seems so far away, as Shlomo Melech says. And that's the key of being a Jew, and that's why the Torah tells us that a person who's unwilling to change himself to that extent, a person who's not willing to completely let go of his paradigms and to transform himself and to reorient himself completely, he's a tamei person by definition, and he deserves to be cut off. Because the whole concept of existing as a human being is to connect ourselves to Hashem. And it's only us Jews that understand intrinsically and instinctively that there's always more to understand. There's always more to change about how we understand things. And that's why we always ask why. But a human being that's unwilling to do that, is unwilling to put himself into a mindset of I need to let go of what I think makes sense. I need to orient myself into the way the Torah says that things are supposed to make sense. It's only that person that can actually get to the Beis HaMikdash. And the whole purpose of life is to get close to Hashem and to have that access to Hashem. But if we close ourselves off to it by not being willing to have every experience in the ohel, in the tent of the Torah, when we sit down to study, if we're not willing to let go of who we think we are in order to enter this universe that Hashem is trying to present to us in the Torah, there is no connection, and that will be cut off because we have completely defiled the sanctity of life. Completely. And so I cannot emphasize enough the importance of asking questions, especially in the Torah, but asking questions for the sake of exploration and understanding the universe that Hashem created, the wisdom that Hashem gave us in the Torah. That's the purpose of existence. And so that's why the Torah over here is telling us that a person who becomes unclean, so that means he really gets connected to the finite, to the fact that this world is very short, and he doesn't have a penchant to purify himself. He doesn't immediately try to seek a way to overcome the shackles of this finite existence. That's a person that will be cut off. Because going through the motions is not what it's about. It's about trying to truly access the wisdom that Hashem has given to us. And that's why this is the chok of the Torah. The chok of the Torah means this is the mindset that all of the Torah needs in order to access the infinite wisdom of Hashem. So we think we put on tefillin, maybe we think we understand a little bit about why we put on tefillin. We're attaching certain parshios to our body. We're remembering Yitzias Mitzrayim. We're trying to elevate our mindset and our heart. Okay, that's great. That's a good beginning. It's a good start. But if you think that's what it is, so then you're not really opening to understand further depth of the tefillin, then that's a person that doesn't really have the Torah and doesn't have the chok of the Torah at all. And in order to really overcome death, which is this point I just want to go on for a couple minutes, and then we'll get to questions and comments. In order for a person to overcome death, what we need is for a person to have a mindset that there's something much more than what we see in this world. You know, the reality of human beings, as David HaMelech says, is Rabam Amal Va'aven. And we say this in the Psukei de Zimra on Shabbos, that most of life is pain and anguish. There's so many things that we worry about before we go to sleep at night, and when we wake up in the morning and in the middle of the night and throughout the day. There's a lot of difficult things in the world and suffering, and for anybody who's not living a sheltered, narrow, narcissistic life, and they're aware of the pain and suffering of Achinu Kol Beis Yisrael and people that are not well or people that have passed away, there's a lot of difficulty in life. And that's really part of what the Torah is alluding to here. That's the tumas meis. Because what happens is it could enter into a person's mind the kind of futility of everything, and a person could read Koheles and say that also, Havel Havalim, everything is Havel, like what's the point? And a person could have a very negative and pessimistic view of life. And the Torah is telling you the opposite. We have no permission to think that anything Hashem is giving to us is anything negative. Not the chok of the paraduma, not the life itself that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to us. It's all for the good. And even though it's filled with challenges and difficulties, it's only because Hashem wants what's best for us, and that is ultimately going to be, a blissful existence in the future. But even now, we have to really appreciate all the benefit that we get from the Torah and from our relationships, and all the good that we have in this world. But a person who's steeped in the pain of it and in the mortality, the finite quality of this world, that's a person who's really missing out on getting a connection with Hashem, and that's a person who becomes skeptical and fatalistic. That's a person that is unfortunately cut off. That really is. My brother Rav Zachariah has said to me, and I really like this approach, that in Shmona Esrei, when we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayim Mesim or Mechayim Mesim Ata Rav Lo Shia, we're not only talking about the ultimate future when people who have literally died will come back to life. We're talking about people who have depression, people who have given up, people who are fatalistic, those are people that Hashem can help and bring them back to life as well. And the truth is, if we just have a mindset of positivity and curious explanation and ask deeply hard questions and challenge ourselves to understand what is it that Hashem is teaching us, what are the messages that Hashem gives us in our lives, all we need to do is approach those questions with openness and curiosity instead of skepticism, and then we connect to living, and we ultimately connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. And for this reason, I'll just conclude with this: the Torah places this parsha here, which is a strange place in the Torah to put it, because the truth is that now we're about to get to a pasuk that's towards the end of the 40 years in the desert. That comes right after Parah Aduma. We're at the point where the new generation is now getting ready to enter Eretz Yisrael after 40 years in the desert. And Parah Aduma was done in the first year. They processed the Parah Aduma at the beginning of their time in the desert, right at the beginning of when the Mishkan was first erected. So why does the Torah only put it over here? And my suggestion is because when things are all roses, and we're supposed to go into Eretz Yisrael, and we're not supposed to have 40 years of misery in the desert, yeah, sure, Parah Aduma is much easier to swallow. But when things are so down, and we're dealing now with so many people that have died, and a next generation, which on some level is a lesser generation going into Eretz Yisrael, we could become more negative. And we have a responsibility today, especially, to look at the wonder, the true miracle that is Am Yisrael today, the way that we have rebounded, the way that we have fought, the way that we have supported one another, which we've spoken about over these last few weeks, and the miracles, the absolute miracles that have gone into helping us achieve what we've achieved today, notwithstanding all the continuing future challenges ahead of us. We have a responsibility to see the positivity in that, and the messaging from Hashem telling us who we can become if we just follow Him, follow His Torah, follow these processes that maybe seem like they don't make sense, and understand that there is so much chachma and so much beauty and so much life infused into it. Approach it with that kind of positivity and exploration, never stopping to ask why and how, just being very careful to never skeptically put it down, because that's the opposite of exploration and connection. That ultimately is death. And the Torah is telling us that the law of the Torah is that we overcome death, we experience positivity, and that comes through endless exploration and questioning. Any comments or questions? All right. Yeah, we have a question.
Thanks, Akiva. Good class.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Thank you, Reb Mordechai.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
I'm sorry I wasn't able to come from the beginning, but from what I heard, I enjoyed immensely. And I don't know, you might have touched on this since I came late, but I always thought that Chukas, came after Korach in order to, as a real limud, that we don't have to understand everything, and that when Korach would bring up these things about the chelis or a house that has all the svarim, do you still need a mezuzah? This sort of stuff. That it was was sort of like a reaction to that as a limit to everybody. That yes, there's going to be things you don't understand, but yet there is a Muna Peshuta. And look what you went through and all the miracles, and you should learn that, there's things beyond you and beyond your seichel.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. We have to recognize that there are things beyond our seichel, but I'm also saying that we can acquire more seichel if we're willing to really change ourselves and our limitations, our self-imposed limitations, into how we're willing to think about things.
Okay. Yeah. Shkoch, Rabbi.
Shkoch. Thank you. Anyone else for today?
Yes, Rabbi Kiva.
Hi, Rabbi Chil.
Yes, good morning. Just it came to mind. I just was going to ask you this question, but it came to mind to frame it in this way. The questions by Paraduma Deas is a contradiction. It's a conundrum. Obviously, there's many, many more conundrums in the Torah. And the question would be, why do we need to learn this by the Paraduma? And obviously, I just hit me like a ton of bricks, is because what you're pointing out is dealing with death and existential concepts rather than any other conundrums that we have, and plenty, like you said, and shotness, etc.
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. I should have said it better before, but 100%. One of our biggest self-imposed limitations is that we tend to think of ourselves as finite beings. Like, people have this illusion that they're going to live forever, knowing that they're not going to live forever physically. And at the same time, we're forgetting that we really are living forever in the nitzchias, but it's hard to relate to that. So we tend to just think of our limitations rather than our endless potential. And we have to overcome that in order to really explore everything in the Torah. That's correct. Yishar kochacha. Thank you, everyone. I believe my father is just giving shir. I think I'm getting a thumbs up from my mother. And so please zoom on over to my father in just under 15 minutes. Have a super day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Great class.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akiva. It was very nice.
Very.
Always a pleasure, Kianish. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.